You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini, and as I announced to you earlier, the breaking news that has come in, rather unfortunate, is that former Secretary General of the United Nations, Dr. Kofi Annan, has passed, and we have confirmed that with our sources within the country where he presently has found himself in the last few days undergoing treatment. He reportedly had gone to South Africa, and from his return from South Africa, he was unwell. He reported unwell and was taken into the hospital in Geneva and was pronounced dead this morning. And we need to bear up with his family. He was 80. Now, you should get ready to have a great show this morning on Newsfile, and this is the reason. My guests are seated. I will not do a take. Let me introduce my guests to you. And I'm more than excited to have this guest to do the show this morning. Yet once again, today we'll be doing two segments. We'll do a first segment on the bank crisis, and then we'll do a second segment where we'll deal with the FIFA matters as regards analysis, investigations, and the outcome. And then we would look at the happenings in Tamale as regards the Tamale Teaching Hospital. My guest this morning, Dr. Richmond Acheampong, he's banking and corporate governance consultant. He was here last week. I'm sure you enjoyed him. Also here is Joe Jackson. He's Director of Business Operations, Dalex Finance. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Right. This will be the second time I'm having you on Newsfile?
No, this is actually my first time.
This is your first on Newsfile?
Yes.
Okay. So Ken Thompson and Joe Jackson, they seem to have something in common. Right. And presently both of them, you can hear them very loudly on a crusade to have the stakeholders, the persons who have been indicted, so to speak, in the bank crisis, prosecuted immediately, and they say throw them away. Okay. And my other guest, Bright Simmons, he's Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa. I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on the show this morning, Bright.
It's a delight.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
Also in the studio is Yoni Kolendi. He is a private legal practitioner. Good morning and welcome.
Samson, thanks for having me.
Right.
Good morning.
So this morning you clearly don't want to change your dial and you don't want to leave your seats. This show is also available on DSTV channel 421, DSTV channel 421. For those of you watching us in London and elsewhere in Europe, you're watching us on the ABN television, and we're streaming live at myjoyonline.com. This is your JoyNews channel, and we're live on Joy 99.7 and over a dozen affiliate stations across the country. Okay, so I certainly can't have my take. So briefly, let me hear you say a word about the unfortunate news, the breaking news that has just come in. I'll start with Bright.
It's quite surprising. Just this week, I think, Kofi Annan launched the 2017 Kofi Annan Foundation report, annual report. And you know the work that he's done with Africa Progress Panel, some really outstanding work on governance, on conflict resolution, etc. Completely shattered to hear that he's left us. Every time I've seen him, he looks younger than the year before. So it's quite a surprise that this has happened. We obviously offer condolences to his family, and he's left a void that I'm completely certain cannot be filled for a very long time. We wish him, we wish his family strength in these very trying times, and that we hope that he rests in perfect peace.
Right. Thank you. Yoni?
Something. Obviously very devastating.
I got an expression on your face when I was announcing it.
This is not the way to get into this conversation. We have lost an illustrious son of the world, but more so of Ghana. Condolences to the family, to those who worked and lived closely with him. This is an irreplaceable loss, but a stark reminder of this reality of life, that however great you are, there's a day to exit, and that should guide our actions.
All right. Doc.
Shock and devastated, because I met him somewhere when I was a young man in school with my cousin, and I followed him critically, and I think he has really impacted on some of us, our lives. And it's rather unfortunate that he should be called to eternity at this moment in time. But the consolation that we have is that he has left such an indelible mark for some of us, and I wish to express my condolences to the family and to all his near relatives. And may God comfort them so that they can go through these trying moments.
Right. This judge is certainly a loss to the entire world, not only Ghana and to his family.
It is a huge loss. Well, when you announced it, I had this sinking feeling, as soon as you were sinking feeling in my stomach about it. But for me, what is even more exciting is this. When he reached the height of his career as UN Secretary General, I believe that his term he wasn't as well regarded as we thought he should. And his life after he left that position has been one of increasing prominence as a statesperson and a statesman and as a world citizen. What I believe that his death will take this even to another level, that history will treat him much, much, much better than the countries and the UN, etc., treated him when he was at that high position. So for me, since ultimately all of us have to face that final battle, he's somebody who's lived a good life. He's somebody we should celebrate rather than mourn. And I'm excited because I believe that he's going to be even better regarded than he has been so far in his life.
All right. I suppose that he would wish that we celebrate him rather than mourn. And our condolences once again to his family and to everybody. To everybody. Right. Okay. So now let's commence our discussion for this morning, looking at the bank matters and the reactions that have come as a result of the decisions that the Bank of Ghana has had to take and the reports that have become available to the media and shared with the public. There's the boldest report that has detailed how you find acts of sheer recklessness, so to speak. And like Bright Simmons would say, impunity, leading to the collapse of UT and Capital Bank. And now we are just having the report from KPMG, that's the official administrator of the Unibank, also release its report. Well, cannot say it's released. The Bank of Ghana had access to it to inform the decision that it had to take on Unibank. And this report has just leaked. We have a copy. We'll share portions with you, particularly highlights of what the findings were. But as I announced to you, exclusively again, we are privileged to have some information including documentation that was to be available to KPMG and the Bank of Ghana before the final decision was taken on Unibank. And it does suggest, from my lay appreciation of the financial matters and the jargons used in there, it does suggest that the Bank of Ghana might be the one to take some blame for saddling us, the taxpayers, with what it has pumped in to do the rescue mission it has embarked on. Because a total of 5.7 billion as constituting loans that were impaired and assets of Unibank is what has led to the position or the status that the bank was insolvent and consequently had to be, its license had to be revoked. So this is how we start. We listen and watch briefly to some of the commentary, particularly regarding the reactions that have ensued after, in the course of this week. And then I'll come back to the studio and engage my panelists.
Hopefully, with what we are going to do in the banking sector, everybody will begin to realize that those periods are gone. If I'm going to have to spend 5.6 billion to bail out the banking system because I have to protect depositors, the question is not one of a banking failure. I need to be able to tell you that that managing director or that shareholder stole that money, and it has to be very upfront. Because that's 5 billion that I'm using as opposed to in SHS or school feeding or maternal pregnancy, and the issue of sentiments are out of it. It's not a bank failure. It's individuals who have done something to bring us in this compromising position. I think it is that same sort of sense of social justice that we should bring to bear in the tax administration system. So we would work with faith-based organizations for that and see how their leadership will lead to a real structural attitudinal change as to where we have to go.
The objective of government is to have a robust, well-regulated, well-performing financial services sector. That's the objective. If in our bid to achieve that, some persons are found culpable of criminal conduct, as I've mentioned, and as the finance minister has mentioned, the governor has mentioned, those persons will be dealt with. Criminality needs to be dealt with separately from the big objective, which is to ensure that we have a robust, well-performing, well-regulated financial services sector. It is true that it's been about a year since the Bank of Ghana and its advisors completed their primary investigations and made it available to EOCO and some of the other investigative and prosecutorial agencies. I do know that soon they will now take things to the next level. Prosecutorial action against persons found culpable should be commencing soon. What all of us should also bear in mind is that we have a history in this country where agencies conduct their investigation, present it to the prosecutorial agencies, and sometimes the courts have shut it down because the prosecutorial agencies did not do their own work and come up with their own dockets. So it's important that that is also done properly so that nobody goes to court to go and falter. So the commitment is clear, the process is being followed, the wheels will grind in due course.
Right, so for the first time, we heard the finance minister speak directly to these issues after reports about how he felt uncomfortable and how he had been put in such an invidious position, having to take the actions that he had taken. No, rather, that was the Bank of Ghana governor. But this was Ken Ofori-Atta now speaking about the fact that government was committed to let the axe fall where it had to, and clearly labeling the developments leading to the collapse of the banks as nothing but, you know, individual recklessness that's led to what happened. And then we had the Information Minister Designate, Kojo Opong-Nkrumah, also speak to the press and reiterate government's commitment to ensure that the laws will take their course, as it were, in due course. So this was the first time. Then we had Dr. Mensa Otabil, former chair of the defunct Capital Bank, also issue a statement, and people really went for him. Then we had Prince Kofi Amoabing, also of the UT Bank, also issue a statement seeking to clarify certain matters. Earlier, we had Atu-Acien, you know Atu-Acien of the Capital Bank, also issue a statement. I think he's issued 2 statements so far on the matters. So I'd like to begin by asking of our guests the reactions that have come forward so far, what they make of them very briefly, and then we'll dive into the details of the developments. So start with you, Mr. Joe Jackson. The government's pronouncement through the finance minister, the information minister, we heard Dr. Mensa Otabil, you know, explaining clearly how he was a non-executive, you know, on the board, a director on the board, and how he had no involvement in the day-to-day running of the bank, which people don't understand. I don't understand why, though.
You know, 2 things. One is that as law-abiding citizens, we must presume that you are not guilty unless proven otherwise.
That's a constitutional injunction.
Yes. So what you say, we have to accept at face value to start off with. But what we should demand in no uncertain terms is that the process be followed quickly. Remember that in all this, I single out the finance minister's statement, and the finance minister is not prone to make wild statements. He's a very measured man. But he used certain words that are particularly emotive. He says, they stole. Those were his words. They stole money, and they forced us, the citizens of Ghana, to pay for money that they stole. Now, that should, to be honest with you, that summarizes the issue for me. And he's spoken words that, he used words that they stole. So now we have to find, if somebody stole, who stole? Who's responsible? And who's forced us to pay horrendous sums of money in a country where the government is broke? And regardless of how much we love certain things like free SHS and others, we're struggling to fund them. We have not funded infrastructure for how, look at what is happening to us. And yet, these sums of money were stolen. Please, it's...
You are in the banking or finance industry. Can you say that the nomenclature was wrong? That when he says stole, is it correct to say somebody has stolen? When the Bank of Ghana is giving liquidity support, is it free money to those banks?
Now, you see, you got liquidity support sounds like, it sounds technical and it sounds fancy. Essentially what has happened, you were supposed to bring money to the table to do business. Your money has disappeared or was never there. 2, you took money from depositors. That money has also disappeared. Then the central bank steps in to say, in order to make sure that you don't collapse, take this sum of money and pay off your creditors. Imagine, you are in trouble. Somebody steps in and says, take this sum of money and pay off your creditors so that you survive, and we find ways to bring you back.
I asked the
to the
question
level.
because you're a technical person.
Yes.
When
So-
you say
so-
depositors' funds disappeared,
Yes.
are you saying in effect that those monies had been stolen?
No,
And
I'm
yet the
coming.
Bank of Ghana went to give a bailout?
And you see, at that point, that is, you have to assume that they were recklessly squandered, and the Bank of Ghana steps in to say, these are depositors' funds. That's why banking is in a peculiar sector. When you take your money to the bank, you and I have actually given a guarantee to a third party to say, if anything happens, we'll pay. That's what it means. And so the Bank of Ghana steps in and say, okay, you know what? You ran into trouble. Let's see how we can get you to recover. Then gives you another sum of money. Your own money wasn't there. The money you took was recklessly dissipated. You were then given money to hold things at a level. And then guess what? That money too was dissipated.
So question, that money given to the banks,
Yes.
was it free money?
Definitely not.
Thank you. If it was not free money, tell us so that we, the ordinary people, can understand what the terms of giving out such monies, would be. And when you say the money is disappeared, your own money disappears, and shareholders, depositors' funds also disappeared, does it mean that there is absolutely no hope of recovering these monies? Does it mean that once I put money in a bank and I go for it and I cannot have it at the time I want it, it means the money is being squandered?
Okay, now
stolen?
Let's be clear here. You give me your money. Your money is depositors' funds. I do business with it.
Right.
Now, in doing business, sometimes I can lose money. But that's why there's a regulator to make sure I don't take unnecessary risk or spend your money as if it was mine, where the losses will occur. So when we say that the money was recklessly dissipated, it means the rules that, and when you look at the report, the most striking thing is that the rules that the institution itself set to safeguard the way it does business, those rules were not obeyed. And those rules were set to protect the depositor, the ordinary man who comes in and says, here's my 1,000 cedis, keep it for me. Now, that money is gone, but because we all guarantee that money, the central bank comes and gives you some more money. But the central bank is supposed to do certain things. To put a commissioner in place, or whatever you might call him, someone in place to supervise and make sure that money is done properly, is spent properly. That is the first feeling of the central bank. That they gave that money and did not supervise its usage, such that some of it was even spent, according to their own reports, in creating another set of smoke and mirrors to start another institution. That is beyond the pale.
Okay, so in some 30 seconds, if the money given to the banks, the UT or Capital got about 600 plus million, was that supposed to be, if that was not supposed to be free money, what would be the terms for it?
The terms are typically that when you get back to your, what we call solvency, or you get back to the level, you start to pay that money back.
You pay only the principal?
No, that's why the Bank of Ghana has a lending rate.
Okay.
So the Bank
of Ghana is making profit by giving these monies, is that correct?
It's
seeking to make profit.
Profit is too kind.
Okay, in the process, it will make some profit.
In the process, it may make some return.
Okay.
To call it profit will be too.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Now, Dr. Chahin, now, what do you also say about the developments up to this point?
I think to add to
the reactions, more particularly.
to add to what Joe has said, and in reaction to what you said, the liquidity support is supposed to keep you afloat until you're able to meet what is required in your cash reserve with Bank of Ghana. You're supposed to keep at least it's 9%. Always maintain 9%. We do that to ensure that clearing system go through efficiently and effectively. So if Bank of Ghana sees that your clearing position consistently is overdrawn, then they know you have a problem. So they step in as the lender of last resort.
Okay.
And in these days, since the financial crisis, they're changing the term and calling it emergency liquidity support. So as Joe said, it's not a free money. It's taken at a cost. So they charge you a policy rate. So that is where the policy rate comes in. You pay the policy rate. But don't forget, they also have to go to the market and borrow. They do bonds and everything to support you. So they give you to enable you to come to a certain level playing field where your liquidity is up to a certain level. But unfortunately, as Joe said, you have given related loans, connected loans, which are not irrecoverable. But meanwhile, there are people, money is there, and the checks are flying all over. So Bank of Ghana will give you. But the question that happens is that, which I want to support what Joe has said. If you're giving money, you need to keep your eye on it. Unfortunately, in the normal banking where we used to work, if you don't have the money and we want to give you excess or let you go above your limit, we monitor you. As we give you the money, we monitor you and ensure that you pay back.
Okay.
So if you read the 2018 IMF report, they even set up that Bank of Ghana didn't have a credit committee which were reviewing this liquidity support. And 2018, according to the IMF report, we have done 1.1 billion uncollateralized. Uncollateralized means that if you are borrowing to a certain level, you should assign your treasury bills to support it, so that if you don't pay, they will liquidate it. But they didn't have anything like Nemoda non-con have it. No one claims what they have. They didn't have it. So Bank of Ghana decided to do unsecured or uncollateralized liquidity. And it amounted to 1.1 billion, or 0.5% of the GDP, excluding the two banks that were defunct. So the IMF raised an issue that Bank of Ghana, with immediate effect, have a committee to look at how you give this liquidity support, how you monitor it, and how people pay back. So originally, the monies were given without proper support.
Okay, so what you're doing is analyzing the reactions that have come forward so
That's
far.
right.
Now, he began on Kenneth Oriata. Can it be said that money has been stolen?
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to go into that terrain, stolen. As he said, until proved guilty, you're innocent, isn't it? So something has happened. So it has to be, unless what he's saying, the security agencies has investigated and found out it's actually been stolen, then that becomes a crime. I don't know what you call it.
Until that, as an expert, what is your understanding of the situation? Is it a matter of theft?
For me,
funds
it's a matter of dissipation, reckless dissipation of people's money. That is, people did not comply with any of the regulations and the rules. They choose to go above it and do what they like. So I think that it's a matter of dissipation and malfeasances.
Okay. How do you situate such assertion with what we have come to know, for example, with UT Bank, when it advances so much in loans to Jata Cements, the Ibrahim Mahama connected company, and they have set up a cement factory. We are told it's almost 90% complete, and the arrangement was that when it starts producing, it was going to pay back the loan, and every day it was going to pay, is it in the region of 1 million Ghana cedis, right? Now, can that be classified as theft, stealing, or dissipation?
Well, if the rules of the game were played as the laws required, or the banking policy, their own policy, credit policy, and in addition to the Bank of Ghana policies on credit, like you don't lend more than 25% of your asset secured to one group or a person, a group of companies, and you don't lend 10% unsecured to a group of companies. If these things were followed of your network, if they were not followed, then that was a breach.
Okay.
So what I'm saying, I don't know the quantum and their net worth at the position. If they have lent more than 25% secured of their net worth, then they would have been within the law. Okay. But if they have done it without it, then it means they were outside the law. So that is what I say. So when you do that, and then also if they have done it unsecured, then you have a limit of 10%. So all these rules are set up in the banking laws, whether in the old act or in the new one.
Right.
But if you are not done according to what has been stated in the law, then it is totally in breach of it. And then comes in who approve it. What did he do? So these are the things that has come out. And as you said, as part of, you said my reaction. One of my reaction to one of the things that came, which I said it in graphic, concerning the chairman. And I find it quite, I didn't take it kindly because I thought a chairman.
Which chairman?
The board chairman of, is it Capital?
Okay,
said
Capital.
In reaction, yeah.
Dr. Otabil.
Let me quote something for you. A board chairman is responsible for the leadership of the board. You are part of the board. So you have no to prove alibi that you never knew. And those of you lawyers say ignorance is no excuse of the law. Once you take up the position, it presupposes, and the company law, the Company Act, 1963, 179, it talks about directors. It's made clear, executive directors, independent directors, non-executive, you are responsible for the strategic direction of business, and you are responsible for efficient and effective running of business. So I find it quite incredible.
Whilst the law does not mention executive director and so on, in principles of law and banking or corporate leadership, you would know that these classifications exist.
Exactly.
And they come with different levels of responsibility, correct?
Yes.
So what did he do wrong when he said he was a non-executive director and that he had he was not involved in the day-to-day running of the operations of the bank? Is that fact? Is that correct?
I don't think so. I don't think so. The directors, they said directors are responsible for running the business efficiently and effectively. And it did not go down to break whether you are a non-executive director or director. And what you see, what astonished me most is that, as I said, director, a board chairman, is the leadership for the board. So if you're a board chairman, you're leading a team of board of directors. It didn't say you're leading a team of executive directors. You're leading a directors. It is only when we break down, we say non-executive director. The non-executive directors at times are appointed by the shareholders. But what if you go to the UK FRC, or if you go to the Basel Committee for Banking Supervision, it defines these things detailed. The non-executive director, as he said, is not unless you're an executive chairman, you are not running the day-to-day business. The executive directors will run it. And then if you go further, then we have the independent directors.
Okay, so let me get you clearly, and let's help our viewers and listeners to follow you. You have said effectively that his statement was correct when he said, as a non-executive director, he was not involved in the day-to-day running of the business. Is that correct? Is that
For me, that statement is not correct. That is why I told you the directors are responsible.
I asked that question because you just said non-executive directors. It is executive directors who do what? Run the business.
And I said, let me quote you, let me go back. I said directors are responsible. And in that, it never states non-executive directors or directors.
That is understood.
Then when we break it down, nobody will tell him that he was executive director. He knows he's a non-executive. But at the end of the day, whatever the executive director does, come to the fore of the non-executive directors, which for me, you are responsible for that.
Okay, thank you. Right. Yes, so yeah, these matters that have come up as a result, we will take our time get into a bit of the detail and the technical matters to deal with. But so far, it's the first time we have had government, the Minister of Finance speak, we've had the Information Minister speak.
Yeah.
Of course, for government, communicate for government. We have Otabil issue a statement, Prince Kofi being issue a statement, and also you have had Atuesian issue 2 separate statements. Yeah.
I have a lot to say. I'm not sure where to, where to start. I've been tweeting, like you pointed out earlier in the day, because it's a matter of great curiosity for me. I find I'm learning a lot just, understanding how these things happen. One, there is some difficulty because of the way that the Bank of Ghana has chosen to proceed. There's been some difficulty in untangling the different sets of responsibilities among the different actors involved. Let's not get confused. There are 7 different banks, each of them with very different characteristics in terms of the reason why they're insolvent and why they have liquidity issues and the rest of it. Secondly, personally, there's great difficulty in trying to understand where the bank is suggesting criminality and where it is saying that, these people are just incompetent. They didn't know how to run banking very well. They didn't understand risk management. They were not so good in understanding the operational risk and the market risk that they were faced with. So it becomes very difficult, given the nature of the reports and the fact that they are leaking tidbits as opposed to putting out their own position on the administrator reports and the receivership reports that they've received. So these are matters that make things a bit difficult. But let me make a few points. And I may go into them in better detail later on as the show progresses. One, there is something to be said for any government agency, such as the Bank of Ghana, taking its audience seriously. I don't see that. As somebody who's been in policy activism now for a decade and a half in Ghana, I have some experience in terms of the way that governments operate, to say that it follows a very consistent culture in Ghana where nobody wants to be clear about the way things are and therefore uses that to evade responsibility. There are so many aspects of this particular crisis where the Bank of Ghana should be clear on its position in regard to the way that it's managing the crisis. One, deposit insurance was supposed to have been activated in April of 2018. The law was passed October 2016. We don't know for a fact if premiums were being collected from the banks to protect small depositors. We know there's about 500,000 or more bank accounts that are at risk in this situation. How many of those are small depositors' accounts? How much premium has been paid already? It appears to suggest that there isn't even deposit insurance on the radar. So all the money that is currently being placed on the shoulders of the ordinary citizen is entirely something that the ordinary citizen ought to bear. But if we have insurance, deposit insurance, then it presupposes that some of that risk has been underwritten. And we need to understand in greater detail what has happened to that particular situation. And they've never mentioned it.
Okay.
Number two, and I think Dr. Chuahin has already mentioned the fact that they were giving liquidity support which they were not collateralizing, which essentially means that they don't say, look, you have these treasury bills, come and put them down. We own them now. Now you take this money because you want fast liquidity to sort out yourself. It appeared as if people were using liquidity support, which was for emergency purposes, in a chronic manner. So literally, and the reason why it's dangerous. Because of the fact that the policy rate in Ghana is substantially lower than what you can get on the commercial markets. You can actually run banking simply by borrowing from the central bank and giving it out. You borrow at 25% from the central bank, you lend at 35%, and just continue to do that. That kind of arbitrage is not sensible banking. It shouldn't be encouraged. So it makes sense that you're using liquidity support purely to ensure that the short-term liabilities as they come due do not become themselves a reason why the bank goes down. Okay. So when somebody makes liquidity support as the central fulcrum around which their bank operations run, then you have a problem. But here's my question. Has the Bank of Ghana stopped doing that? Or are they still giving out liquidity support to banks without collateral across the ecosystem? Thirdly, we have a situation where they've set aside 450 million Ghana cedis to...
For those of you watching television, what you're seeing now are some aspects, snippets of the KPMG report on the Unibank, some of the highlights as far as the executive summary is concerned. Yes, let's go on.
You've set aside 450 million cedis to capitalize a new bank. You don't explain to the public that this bank will continue servicing deposits, that this bank will continue to need liquidity support itself, because regulatory capital is not supposed to be used to run the day-to-day of the bank. If regulatory capital is 400 million and you have given them 450 million, that presupposes 50 million working capital.
Right.
How is that bank going to run? It means that you are suppressing the true extent of the problem. You need to tell us how will the bank meet the ongoing...
KPMG in their report
Yes.
say that doing a bridge bank
Okay.
is going to be a challenge, a difficult challenge.
Yes.
We'll get to portions of that because you are mentioning how difficult that could be.
Yeah, because you're saddling them with billions of cedis of liabilities. And those liabilities need to be serviced. People are going to go there and continue to withdraw money. And in actual fact, we're going to see accelerated withdrawals, given the situation that we face. So the cost to the government of setting that bank is not 450 million. It's the cost of trying to manage the ongoing challenge. This is why you are doing the bond. Which now brings us to the issue about the full cost of the bond, the total cost of that bond. They are not telling us about interest. So they say 5.6 billion is a lot. And people go, oh, 5.6 billion is a lot. But actually, if it's a 7-year bond, we need to look at the compounding effects of interest on that bond.
Okay.
And eventually may hit 12 billion or something like that. So my view is that there is a certain disrespect for the audience in the sense that they think that you people don't care, so let's just go and say something. And I have a problem with that because there are those of us that are interested. Why? Because in the end, the effects on governance is material. Another issue that we have is the fact that they did early termination of the administration process. The administration process was supposed to go on to September. Then somewhere in, I think, August, was it this August or even late July, they said, they have had enough, we don't go ahead. But when you read all the reports that
was it supposed to go on to September or was to be within the 6 months?
So if you look at the roadmap that the administrators drew themselves, clearly they needed up to September.
Okay.
Because they had review at certain points in the rest of it. And this is what is more interesting. When you read the leaked reports, in almost every instance, they tell you that they don't really have the full facts.
Okay.
Because there are situations where the terminus system that had been deployed in some of the banks had actually, was not working properly. So general ledger accounts and everything were disorganized and distorted. So what we are being fed in some instances is actually just somebody's best guess of the situation.
But they start by giving you what I will call the introductory caveats.
Where
they say the data they have relied on is unverified, unconfirmed,
okay, so you have
and
provisional
so forth.
reports.
And therefore, you rely on them. They are relying on them to the best of their abilities.
So why are you running policy on them? When you have 6 months, they have 6 months to do work. It gets to around 4.5 months or 5 months or whatever. You say we have enough to move on. But at the end of the day, you are running policy based on this information that is coming out. I don't have a difficulty because there were emergency actions that needed to be taken.
Okay.
We had to, preserve the stability of the banking system. So I get it, but you have to explain so that people understand the risk that the government's policy itself represents. Otherwise, then you have other problems. Then and I have a challenge with the way that we do things generally. Regarding the issue around non-executive versus executive directors, I think I understand Pastor Otabil's frustrations in the matter because you see he's not been in most of his operational experience has actually not been in banking, so to speak. If you look at father, he ran universities and the ministry. So in conventional language, yes, there's a sense that non-executive directors have perhaps reduced responsibility. There's this myth, and I think a lot of people run around with those myths. Banking, which is extremely regulated, and particularly Ghanaian banking, on the other hand, if you look at the directives that the Bank of Ghana issues in respect of these matters, actually non-executive directors and independent directors are saddled with more responsibility because executive directors are barred from subcommittees. So audit committees, risk committees, all of those explicitly bar executive directors. What I said is that simply means that you also have a management position in the bank. So essentially, you are chief operating officer, you are something like that, you are an executive director. Anybody else that is not an employee of the bank but is on the board of directors is a non-executive director. And by law, at least by regulatory fiat, the chairman of a bank in Ghana must be a non-executive director. That's Bank of Ghana rules.
Okay.
So he couldn't have been anything anyway. His concern is that he was not completely brief about the day-to-day, there is some degree of confusion about the way that the corporate governance directive has been set up. It says that the board chairman should not be a member of any of the key committees. I'm not sure to that extent whether that is what he's interpreting them to mean. Because in actual fact, the subcommittees run the banks. Every loan, every new product has to be approved by them. Any credit above a certain level, because the CEO approval limit is quite small for big banks that are tier 1 banks. So in practice, the subcommittees run the banks.
Okay.
If maybe the fact that the Bank of Ghana insists that board chairman should maybe not be part of some of these decisions, or at least chair these subcommittees, is what he's interpreting to mean that he's not involved in the day-to-day, then I understand where he's going. But the truth of the matter is that, and as Dr. Tuahine has said, it is the board, as far as banking is concerned, it is the board that takes not just the strategic decisions, but a lot of the actual operational decisions as well are taken by the board.
Okay.
But I can understand his frustration if he feels that people think, he's been, and it's true that in the discussion that has ensued, too many people are focused on him.
Right.
Even when his bank is posing one of the, there's a small risk compared to the Unibank crisis, for instance. So the excessive focus, I guess, is making him frustrated. But the truth is, if he was chairman of the board, and you've already pointed out that the regulations and the laws don't necessarily make a distinction between the board chairman and other directors already. The truth of the matter is the board is responsible for every key decision that a bank takes in Ghana.
All right. Now, so you just get ready for a lot more of that. There's a portion I was referring to when, Bright cautioned sort of about the reliability of the data or whatever that had been worked upon. And I'm referring to the KPMG report here, where I did, state that they seem to also suggest same. Well, first, they indicate that what they have done is not an audit. So it should not be held as an audit. It's not an audit. They simply did something pursuant to the Special Deposit Taking Act, Section 114, which 1145, which requires them within 90 days of getting into official administration to produce a report. And they have produced a report pursuant to terms or terms of reference from the Bank of Ghana. But this is what they stated. They said, as stated in our engagement letter, unless otherwise stated in our report, we have not sought to verify information contained herein or perform procedures necessary to enable us to express an audit opinion on any of the financial or non-financial information contained in this report. Accordingly, we cannot and do not express an audit or similar opinion on the information contained in this report. We have not obtained formal confirmations from employees of the bank that they have made available to us all significant information relevant to our report, which they have knowledge of. Accordingly, we are unable to determine the extent to which information and explanations provided us are complete and accurate, and the report should be read in that context.
But the reason why they can't is because the 2017 audit was aborted midway.
Okay.
Because the bank refused to cooperate with its auditors.
All right.
So we are dealing with more complication than a lot of people suppose.
All right. So, and just a bit before Unique comes in, about the finance minister and the statement that we have attributed to him as we Mr. Jackson started his, contribution. I just feel that it may be important to read in full what he had to say so that we are not seem to misquote him. He said, if I have to spend about 5.6 billion cedis to bail out the banking system because I have to protect depositors, the question is not bank failure, but I should be able to tell you that the money was stolen by a director or a shareholder, and it has to be proven very upfront. So the context where he used stolen, he said, I should be able to tell you that the money was stolen by a director or shareholder, and it has to be proven upfront. We should understand that the problem is not bank failure, but rather individuals that have been irresponsible with the management of these banks, which has brought us into this compromising position. Yes, so we certainly can have the benefits of, without any doubt, superior legal, commentary on what we have looked at so far. Uni.
Well, thanks, Samson, and thanks to our listeners. You just tried to put the finance minister's statement in full.
Once again, we are grateful that you made time. You haven't been on TV or radio for
in a long
decade
time.
or more.
I had to, because you sit back, you listen to the conversations, and you see the usual Ghanaian drama at play, where talk is cheap, where people make assumptions and presumptions. But because we live in a sensitive environment, to wit, a democracy, occasionally we stampede decision makers, we stampede situations, and we always end up with failed outcomes. So you see that you have just reread the finance minister's statement, and if we listen to it and want to be candid, some of us will have to recall the statements we have made, because we have attributed to him a statement that he didn't make, an inference, an import that you cannot reasonably draw from his statement. Because one, we don't take our time to listen. Number two, we don't process. We always have desired objectives and we are quick to jump there. The man is saying, this money cannot go down the drain. If it has to go down the drain, I have to show that it is somebody's fault and that it has to be proven up front. People have already concluded that some people are thieves, some people have raided, some people have shared and are jumping around and saying throw them into jail. We have not learned how many times we have stampeded the system into these rushed conclusions, and when these situations are measured against the rigorous test of the law, they implode. The system suffers, we get nowhere, but we are back at it again. But I'm consoled, not just by a more critical evaluation of what the finance minister said, but when you lace it into what the Minister for Information said. The Minister for Information said, the objective of government, and that is a consolation, is to ensure that we have a robust, well-regulated, and efficient banking system. And I think that's the bigger issue that we have to focus on. Then the minister says that criminality, the lesser objective, will also be addressed. I pray that those seized with the odious duty of making the decisions stay on this well set out objective and not be stampeded into the rushes, the rash conclusions, the prejudgments that people have already come to. Because if we do, again, we are not going to fix the problem. Now, Samson, first of all, banking generally, particularly in our part of the world.
Did you say criminality or prosecution should be a lesser objective?
He said that criminality is the lesser objective. That's what the minister says.
And you support that posture?
I support that. The reason I support that is that you can end up, if you want, assuming it could be done. And trust me, it won't happen in the way that people presume. We've lived this process time without number. But assuming it could be done, you don't solve this problem by throwing a few people into jail unless you go back and fix the fundamental problems. If you ask me, this is a huge, massive, and Bright got to it. It's a regulatory failure.
And can't we do both?
That is what
can't
it is.
we do both?
We can do both.
Throwing those people in jail and fixing?
Absolutely. If people are responsible, ultimately they ought to be held responsible. But we need to do first things first. Why do I say so? Banking in our part of the world is the single most regulated activity. There's no activity as rigorously regulated, at least in terms of the formulation of the law, practice, and powers, like banking. Something, when you read this law, the Banks and Specialized Deposit Institutions Act, you will be scared as a lawyer at how much power that central bank has. They have more power than Jubilee House and the presidency.
Banking,
Powers that border on clear arbitrariness. It's a dangerous document. Now, and for anybody, and so as a result, in fact, when I read this in the UT crisis, and to be candid with your listeners, we have arbitration proceedings pending, instituted by my firm on behalf of the some of the shareholders of UT Bank against the central bank, because I said, you know what, we are giving to sitting by and waiting till we are banned. I think that people have to start testing this law in order to begin to get the law interpreted and circumscribed and defined. Otherwise, something, read this law, and anybody can go and look for this, is as much English. Now, and to have a regulator presiding over institutions with all of these powers, and we end up where we are. If you take a step back and pause, if indeed when the dust settles and the investigations are followed through, we find that these matters out there, all of these reports you are reading, they are allegations. Some are even untested, unfounded allegations. You will be, as the caveat is in the KPMG report, this is their opinion. They haven't even spoken to the people who are in charge. They have not verified the books. You cite a provision, 1445. There's no 1445. 1145. Now, you take the boldest report, which is supposed to have stoked this whole matter, particularly in relation to the
UTN Capital.
There are shareholders in, say, Capital Bank who don't know Boulders, have never spoken to Boulders, Boulders have never spoken to them. And yet, there is in their report the things stoking the emotions that shareholders have distributed as much as over $400 million Ghana cedis to themselves as shareholder loans. As I'm giving to doing, I found out and spoke to a shareholder. The shareholder said, listen, Mr. Kulendi, read my lips. I have never in my life borrowed one Ghana cedi from the bank. Never. I said, but Boulders say you have borrowed 11 million Ghana cedis and secured it with your shares.
So how does he explain that?
It's nomenclature. The bank is looking for new money, new injection and capital. On the books of the bank are bad debts. Bad debts. So everyone will do a preliminary due diligence and say, no, I can't touch this. It doesn't look attractive. In consultation and collaboration with the regulators, a decision was reached. Listen, if you stay with these kinds of debts on your books, nobody will put new money into your bank. And so you are headed to the brink. So why don't you, the shareholders, agree to absorb these debts, which is money you have the bank lent to people that you can't recover? And something, I'm in the business of recovering money for banks. As I speak to you, I have suits, huge suits, numbers. Ghanaians are given to borrowing and not paying. And so the banks are struggling with bad debts. People complain about interest rates. It's because our risk profile is bad. So these are real debts. So they say, apportion it to yourselves, absorb it as shareholders' loans, because at the end of the day, you are the stakeholders in the undertaking. It cleans up the books. To make it look better, collateralize the loans with your shares. So the loans are distributed pro rata. So this poor shareholder who I spoke to has 11 million charged to his name as a shareholder debt. He agreed to collateralize his shares in order to make the books look good and to attract new money, so that when new money comes in, efficiency is created, business booms, you get dividends, you eventually pay off that loan, which is money that some debtor didn't pay, and still make profit.
But is that a secure prospect that a new money will come in, you will get dividends, and then you end up paying off the loan? You have not taken a dime as a loan, and you agree that such a quantum, 11 million, should be posted against your name and against your shares.
Something that's
hoping that a new money will come in.
Yes.
And then when you make money, you get dividends, you pay off. Is that a secured, prospect?
So Samson, that is what distinguishes businessmen from the rest of us. When you set up law firm, you didn't know there was no security that you get a client. But you borrowed, invested money, borrowed to buy books and set up the law firm. Okay? I did the same. I had no guarantee that somebody will trust me and give me their work. Businessmen are risk takers. But that's another conversation. But I'm saying, if this explanation is true, what is this business about shareholders' loans? So if Boulders had spoken to this shareholder, they would have had the benefit of this explanation. And so this misleading information that has stoked people to go around shouting and calling for people's heads, even before everyone is spoken to, these things are measured and evaluated, is all over.
Okay.
So if this is true, Samson, you are a lawyer. Bright, you are a lawyer. This is where you're going to go to court and say...
Bright is not, but his appreciation of the law is great.
I always say that 90% of the law, if it's a soup, of the ingredients in it is logic and common sense. And so anybody who, by the grace of God, is endowed with logic and common sense is 90% a lawyer. That's why they call you pocket lawyers. But let's move on. So that's the context.
Okay. I wanted you to proceed, move forward briefly on the non-executive, banter we have had.
I will come to it, but
and help us with your knowledge in that area quickly. Then we'll move on.
I'll make a bigger point that you see, in all of this, I think people need to step backwards and therefore give the people charged with the responsibility the space to be able to look into these things. And by the way, so who is Boulders? Boulders is then an investigator or auditor, financial analyst, retained by the central bank to look into these matters. They must have been, once clients hire you, they give you terms of reference and produce this report. So this report, if you want, could actually be looking one way. It's not looking at the totality of the circumstances that led to this, because all this hue and cry about liquidity support. Liquidity support, as your interrogations have led people to admit, are loans. These are loans that they give to you to help you, first of all, stabilize a crisis and recover. And in any event, unless you go down, you will pay. And some of the banks, up to the date that the plugs were pulled on them, were paying back to the central bank. But let's assume that when the dust is down, it's cleared, and we go through the process.
Sorry, just a second.
We find out that.
Just a second. Joe Jackson, is that the case that they were actually paying these?
I can't speak to that.
You can't speak to that. Okay, so it's a matter of fact.
It's only
so if it is the case,
central bank who can give us that information. I can't speak to that.
Right. Yes, and so if it is the case, first of all, one is the case. At least we all agree that this is a loan which they must pay back. And if it is the case that they were paying back, either principal or principal plus interest, they were still going concerns. But let's assume that when we complete the process, we make the judgment that these assistance ought not to have been granted. Who gives support without first evaluating the situation? Because the central bank as regulator has unfettered access Something they can knock on the door of the bank any day, walk into your vault, actually count your physical cash and compare it with what is on your closing balances. It's such an unfettered, wide power. So if it turns out that you ought not to have given the support in the circumstances in which you did, do you blame the one who received the support, or you blame the one who gave the support in circumstances where they ought not to have given that support?
Give me a second again, sorry.
Who holds
Let me
the trust to the Ghanaian people?
You, Mr. Jackson raised that, Dr. Chiahino also raised that question about the lack of appointment of a commissioner or a supervisor to monitor how the bailout money is used.
How your loan money is used.
Yeah, the loan money is used. Now, I want to understand, when they give out that money, is it that they just say, we have assessed that you need 600 million, so they just give it to you and you start using, or as and when you require it, they will vet the purpose for which you require it and actually be the ones to pay your creditors? Is that how it is?
So there isn't a one-size-fits-all. It depends on the circumstances. Typically, with overnight lending and some of these things, there are minor incidents where short-term liabilities are due. They suspect that their cash reserves is low at the bank. The Bank of Ghana itself can see it because they maintain these deposits on their behalf. They say, okay, you get this plug-in. My problem is that in this instance, it appeared as if the money was being injected as investment, in the sense that it looked as if these people have become chronically dependent on liquidity support.
And I'm asking that because they are giving the money, and as we told, they use it for a different purpose.
Well, because in one case, they went on using liquidity support for 2 years consistently, running the bank with it. And I'm saying there's nowhere in the world where central bank financing of day-to-day operations is considered acceptable. And I think he will validate that. So we have to be clear what it is. Every bank in Ghana, once in a while, gets some support from the Bank of Ghana, typically on very short-term basis.
All right.
In terms of the policy rate, the fact that the Bank of Ghana lends at the policy rate, but that is entirely the structure of the industry. You have a discount rate, you have a policy rate, you have a base rate. They all interconnect. That is the design. So the problem emerges when you have a moral hazard situation where it is quite clear to the person borrowing the money that I can rely on the central bank. I can rely on public money. Obtain a reasonable spread, because if you're getting a 10% spread, that is actually the average spread in the industry. So if you're going at 25% and lending at 35%, that is actually fairly close to the industry average.
Okay. Now, can you just finish up and quickly go to the questioning that you wanted to address also about non-executive and all that?
You see, because banking is central to a modern economy, and because trust and confidence is fundamental to banking, that is why these powers and arrangements are in place, that you can give support and bailouts, overnight lending, etc., because you don't want anything that dents the public confidence that your money is unsafe in a bank. In the last few months, what have we done? We are close to fracturing what underlies banking, which is confidence of the population in the banks, particularly banks that have indigenous Ghanaian ownership.
Okay, we'll
raise find out what is happening
about the implications. We can address that.
Yes. When Bright is my time.
I will need to take a break. I need to take a break.
Because he's taking my time already once.
Yes, I need to take a break, and when we return, we can address this other aspect of it.
And I wanted you to speak to your. I'll speak to directorship, because people have gone around with it, and there's just so much ado about nothing. Samson, this is section 203 of the Companies Act. Yeah, so I won't speak, I'll read it.
Okay.
Section 203 says, it's titled Duties of Directors. A director of a company stands in a fiduciary relationship towards the company and shall observe the utmost good faith towards the company in a transaction with it or on its behalf. 2, a director shall act at all times in what the director believes to be the best interest of the company as a whole,
so as to preserve its assets, further its business, and promote the purposes for which it was formed, and in the manner that a faithful, diligent, careful, and ordinarily skillful director would act in the circumstances. 3, in considering whether a particular transaction or course of action is in the best interest of the company as a whole, a director may, in the interest of the, a director may consider the interests of the employees as well as the members are shareholders of the company, and when appointed by or as a representative of a special class of members, shareholders, employees, or creditors, may give special but not exclusive consideration to the interests of that class. 4, a provision, whether contained in the regulations of a company or in a contract or in a resolution of a company, shall not relieve a director from the duty to act in accordance with this section or relieve the director from a liability incurred as a result of the breach of a provision of this section.
Yes.
So this is the law on directorship. So all your additions, go and refine them, because people are making additions and subtractions. Now, when you are going to have to measure, and that's usually the problem, when the chips are down, this is the matrix against which the conduct, the actions, and omissions of the directors will be measured. Now, let's go to liability.
But there are subsidiary legislation in banking,
Yes,
which are also relevant.
There is no subsidiary, there is no, if you want, and it's good you say subsidiary. If, and let me not be conclusive about it, if the Bank of Ghana issues governance directives or regulations, okay?
Subject to this.
Yes,
Yeah.
pursuant to this. Those laws have a hierarchy. Just like everything in life has a hierarchy. The biggest law, the mother of all laws, is your constitution.
Indeed.
Under the constitution are acts of parliament. Under the acts of parliament are subsidiary legislation, pieces of legislation that other parliament may by law give other persons. So in this act, the director can issue directives which have the effect of law. Those are administrative directives. They don't override an act of a company. That's at least my sense of it. So all of those directives will not take precedence over what the company laws says, because that's the primary legislation. Okay, are they relevant? Yes, because it's a subsector that is being regulated. But bottom line, you are appointed a director under the Companies Act, at the Companies Registry. But because it's specialized, the regulator then approves you because they will run you through what they call a fit and proper test.
But isn't it the case that you have more specific legislation in this case? So it should take, in some sense, precedence over the more general.
No, if you have a more specific legislation that runs pari passu, that is equal ranking, and one is general and one is specific, the specific will prevail.
Yeah,
but
so
first of all, you have
careful.
to be talking at the same level because of the hierarchy. At least that's my contention.
You are just reading liability. If you can just end on that.
So let's go to liability.
Yes, if you can do that
civil
quickly,
liability, section 209. And I'm not saying it. This is what the law says. The law says that where a director commits breach of duty under section 203 to 205. That's why I started by reading it to you, because this is the test whether the director is in breach or not. If the director commits a breach, A, a director and any other person who knowingly participated in the breach is liable to compensate the company for the loss it suffers as a result of the breach. Now let me pause. When you read law, lawyers, you look for operative words. So you must show, anytime you allege a breach of any of these duties I have read, knowing that the director knowingly participated in the act that led to the breach. Otherwise, so please, let's calm down. B says, a director shall account to the company for a profit made by the director as a result of the breach. And C, a contract or any other transaction entered into between the director and the company in breach of that duty may be rescinded by the company. So this is civil liability. You are now going to go to criminal liability, and by the way, when you go there, the standard, the test is even higher, because in addition to knowing and acting and all of that, you then have to prove intent. You then so people should please, we should not put this appetite of calling to throw people. Let's deal with the important things. This is a regulatory failure. We need to go back and address the things that will enable us, develop, as the communication minister says, a robust, efficient, and well-functioning finance.
Thank you very much. We'll take a break here. We'll return. And we'll be right back. We'll be right back.